Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to both of you. As the Chairman has said, you've got a long day and a long day tomorrow coming up, and I'm sure a number of these questions will be repeated in one form or another. So we thank you for your endurance and your willingness to share with us your thoughts on all of this. I'd like to, first of all, pick up on something Senator Lugar has begun. I think it's very important to making these assessments to look at the broader context, what we're dealing with. And one of the reasons I was a couple minutes late getting over here is we're in the midst of trying to deal with a housing piece of legislation. You've got some 8,000 people a day in this country that are entering into foreclosure on their homes. To put it, the numbers on inflation, unemployment rates, all of these factors which are contributing to a lot of people's concerns about generally where things are heading. I'd like to focus, if I can, just on two quick questions. One, I think more specifically for you, General, to respond to, and one for the Ambassador. One has to do with the condition of our troops. I think all of us here, certainly at this dais, representing our constituency, whatever views we have on policy, there's an incredible admiration for what our men and women are doing in uniform. You both raised it. It's been raised by others. It's very important, I think, that our troops know that. Arguments over policy are one thing, but our commitment to these men and women serving, no division whatsoever. But I was sort of surprised and stunned on some of the recent numbers. A study done by the Department of Defense found that with each additional deployment, soldiers are 60% more likely to develop severe combat-related stress issues, while a study conducted by the Surgeon General of the Army found that soldiers suffering from high levels of combat stress are twice as likely to find themselves in a situation where they are in violation of the armed forces' ethics, standards, and 7 times more likely to hit an Iraqi civilian. So I'd like to ask you, if I could, General, as someone who has really written the book on counterinsurgency, and I say that with great admiration for your background and abilities, what impact is this, the stress of repeated combat tours having on our military's ability to effectively conduct the counterinsurgency campaign? What effect could such high levels of combat stress have on soldiers who must regularly interact with and ultimately win the hearts and minds argument? Both the Army Chief of Staff, General George Casey, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, have both raised serious concerns about our armed forces' capability to react to emerging threats, going to the point Senator Lugar raised about other contingencies where our forces may be called upon. I'll just quote for you, which I'm sure you're aware of, General Cody's comments at a recent hearing before the Armed Services Committee where we were this morning. And I think in relationship to the surge, talking about the surge, he said right now all the units that are back at home stationed are training to replace next units in Afghanistan and Iraq. If the surge comes down the way we predict and we get so many troops back and brigade combat teams back, and we can get the dwell time right, we'll start getting those units trained to full spectrum readiness for future contingencies. I don't know what those future contingencies are, he went on to say, but I know that this nation and this joint force needs to have a division-ready brigade, an airborne brigade ready for full spectrum operations, a heavy brigade combat team ready for full spectrum operations, and a striker brigade combat team ready for full spectrum operations. And we don't have that today. He went on to say, right now, as I've testified, and I've been doing this for 6 years, I was at G3 of the Army and vice chair now for almost years, and I've never seen our lack of strategic depth at where it is today. Now, if we're talking about continuing our forces there, adding to the stress and the assessments being done by the Surgeon General and the Defense Department's own study, in a light of these other issues you're dealing with, obviously, on the ground in Iraq, what additional pressures are we placing on these men and women serving? What additional pressures are we placing on ourselves and our ability to respond to other contingencies, given the pressures that have been recognized by some of your colleagues here at the Department of Defense?
Well, let me talk about Iraq, Senator. Obviously, that's what I'm riveted on, and that's what my mission is. When I got back to Iraq in February 2007, there were 2 enormous changes. The first was the damage done to Iraq by ethno-sectarian violence, as I mentioned, the fabric of society torn. The second, how much more our troopers understand what it is that we are trying to do in this very complex endeavor that is counterinsurgency operations. By the way, counterinsurgency operations require full spectrum operations. They require offense, and we do a lot of it. In the past year, we did the Ramadi clearance, Bakuba, South Baghdad. Some of these were certainly multiple battalions and beyond brigade combat team operations. These are big operations, in other words, not just hearts and minds activities. Certainly involves force protection, some defense, and it involves stability and support operations, which a lot tend to associate with counterinsurgency once the security situation reaches that point. Our troopers really very much understand it, and they are far better at this, far better because of changes made in the institution, in the Army, that General Cody is the vice chief of, in the training of our troopers, their education of the leaders, the collective mission rehearsal exercises, the lessons learned process, and all the rest of that. Now, there's no question but that these multiple tours have put enormous strain on the force. Absolutely. It is something, again, I am personally very keenly aware of. Paradoxically, re-enlistment rates seem to be quite high. Again, I track the units in Iraq, and one of the divisions that is there on its third tour, in fact, getting ready to come home, is a unit that a division commander reported the other day that met their re-enlistment goal for the entire fiscal year at this point right now, obviously about halfway into it. So again, while the troopers very much feel the strain, while I would personally welcome, I look forward to the opportunity for the Army and so forth to come back to 12-month tours, vice 15th month, which are particularly difficult. The troopers that we see in Iraq are doing a magnificent job. They also happen to be the best equipped force. They are vastly better equipped than we were when I was a division commander and we went through the berm, flew over the berm in the fight to Baghdad. And I can give you case after case after case of equipment that places our forces in an absolutely unique position in the world now. And we monitored this when we saw another country starting to do some operations recently in that area and recognized the vast differences between our situational awareness, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, the satellite communications, the fusion of conventional special forces and special mission units, and all the rest of that. It is vastly better than we were in the beginning, and again, our troopers do an extraordinarily good job despite the enormous strain that clearly they and their families have experienced over the course of the last number of years.
Well, I thank you for that answer. I'm still deeply concerned about these reports on stress levels and so forth that are mounting up. And
so I share that. Again, as I stated, and that is a factor in my recommendations. And again, I have, personal experience with it.
I know you do. I didn't get to the question, Ambassador Crocker, just about these militias. Again, the good news is this awakening in dealing with the Sunni militias dealing with al-Qaeda is the good news. It's not a long-term strategy, and exactly the point I think Senator Biden was driving at, in a sense here, we're arming and engaging these militias and at the same time strengthening or calling for a strengthened central government to respond to all of this. How you turn that around, it seems to me, when you're counting on these militias and then trying to integrate them is going to raise some huge issues.
Senator, let me take that one if I could, because there's a few misconceptions. We don't arm any of these sons of Iraq. They are tribal members to begin with. Every Iraqi is allowed an AK-47 in his own house by law, and they are more than heavily enough armed. What we have done is we stood by them initially when the first tribe came forward in October 2006 before the surge. But then subsequent to that, as the chain reaction took place in Ramadi and went up and down the Euphrates River Valley in the early spring and then summer of 2007, enabled by the additional forces out in Anbar, then in Baghdad, South Baghdad, Diyala, and so forth. These individuals have decided to reject the extremist ideology of al-Qaeda, their oppressive practices, and the indiscriminate violence that they visited on all communities in Iraq, not just Shia, but Sunni Arab communities as well. And that's a hugely significant shift. It's a seismic shift in the Sunni Arab world, and one that we hope to see extend even farther.
But we're paying them, of course.
Well, sir, they started out volunteering, and they did volunteer for a long time, and we said, we did the math. And the math is $16 million a month that we pay them with SERP, and now, as I mentioned, the Iraqis are giving $300 million in SERP, or how many tens of millions of loss of vehicles or loss of priceless lives, and I think that was the best investment that we've made in Iraq. And now we are transitioning them, as I mentioned, over 21,000 transitioned to Iraqi security forces or other positions, and slowly but surely, not easily, nothing in Iraq is easy.
Thank you.
Senator Hagel.